For this webcast, I wanted to kind of begin at the end, so to speak, and show you a few examples from past semesters of some really nice JMOLs that have been created along with their explanatory text to give you a foundation for building visualization challenges for the future. I mentioned this on some of the FAQ pages, but you should really think about in your mind what you're shooting for as far as visualization is concerned before you get into the nuts and bolts of actually preparing it and working with JMOL and things like this. This is important because if you don't have a strong conceptual foundation for the purpose and the evidence, for instance, provided by a JMOL image, then you won't really know what to do when you get into the nuts and bolts of working with JMOL, and you want to be very focused and very directed when you get to that stage. So I'd like to show you in this webcast a few examples of past work that's been done to potentially give you some ideas for your own Womadac project. Before we dive into these specific examples, I'll just mention very quickly the preferred challenge format that we're looking for. Remember that we're not just looking for an image with explanatory text or an image by itself. We'd like to see a question as a sort of heading at the top of each challenge. Below that question, the image itself, cloaked or not, is okay. And then the explanatory text below that. And we do this to keep your page organized and standardized. It helps us as course instructors find what we're looking for on your page and be as efficient as possible. So keep that in mind as you're building your challenges moving forward. The example that you're looking at here is from the limonene page in the spring of 2010, and it just shows one nice way that you can go about modifying a protein databank structure and placing it in a JMOL image for more specific purposes. So in this particular example, you're looking at a ligand in the active site of a protein. Specifically, this is geranyl diphosphate in the active site of this protein that leads to limonene. And you can see, at least implied here, some of the interactions that go on between the ligand and the side chains of the enzyme. Here we can see a histidine residue and others surrounding that ligand. And so this is a good start. It shows the geranyl diphosphate in the active site and does a really nice job of zooming in, but we'll see some even better examples moving forward. The second example is one from the NADPH page, and this is a really nice JMOL that actually shows measurements illustrating the interactions between FAD and NADPH in a specific enzyme. And so a hydride transfer step goes on, and these measurements illustrate how this is reasonable given the proximity of FAD and NADPH to one another. And they do the same in a second JMOL that actually shows interactions between the side chains of the enzyme and FAD and NADPH. Notice here that they do a really nice job of describing the content of the JMOL with their explanatory text. In addition to doing this, we expect you to comment on how the content of the JMOL image relates to your mechanism at large. What evidence does it provide, or what does it help to explain? This helps, again, keep your page very organized and very cohesive as a whole, relating everything back to the fundamental mechanism on which you'd like to focus. Moving on to another page from the fall of 2010, the azathioprine page did a really nice side-by-side comparison of two JMOLs. So on the left, you're seeing a JMOL involving this Mercaptopurine base, this weird base that causes a kink in DNA, and that's clearly visible from their JMOL image, and it's compared to normal DNA where the double helix continues unhindered in the presence of a normal purine base. And so again, this team did a really nice job of describing the effects of mercaptopurine activation in a nucleic acid. This is the kind of explanatory text that we're looking for. It relates directly to the mechanism of their topic, which is cytotoxic properties based on its kinking of DNA, and we can see that directly in their JMOL images, and they do a nice job of describing this as well in their explanatory text. Finally, one last example from the bioluminescence group has a Marvin sketch side by side with a JMOL that shows interactions between the protein aquarin and the cholinterrazine ligand. What I like about this is that it cuts out the unnecessary residues of the enzyme and focuses only on what's important. And so in addition to measurements that are illustrating up close and personal the interactions between the ligand and the enzyme, all of the other residues of the enzyme in the background sort of cartoon are cut out, which is nice because these really aren't necessary for the binding of this compound. And again, in the explanatory text, they go above and beyond the content of the JMOL, discussing the fate of choline and tyrosine in the enzyme and the important amino acids that are involved in binding that ligand. So I hope these 5 examples have given you a fairly good idea of what we expect out of the visualization challenge. But as I mentioned before, it's important to keep in mind that you want to visualize and conceptualize first. Think about where you want to go first, what evidence JMOLs can potentially provide you with, and only then begin to build after you have a good idea of what you can get from, for instance, protein databank structures and where you're going in terms of where you'd like to focus your efforts. If you don't do this, you'll spend way too much time spinning your wheels on technological details, so I encourage you to take this advice to heart.